Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. On Apple, recommend Apple Podcasts. On Android, we recommend Spotify. Also, check out the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. I'm going to try to get through this intro without sneezing. Also, check out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. Link right here in the description. You'll bypass the Apple upcharge. The most heat anywhere, the most heat information and conversation. Also, PrizePicks. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. Put down your $5. Get $50 in lineups. They'll be on the Explore page. We welcome all new players here. Again, legal in the state of Florida, FlexPay, PowerPay. It's all there. I made it through. And now, today's episode.
Uh-oh. Yeah. It's Mercy. Music by Mercy again. Heat Nation. We the culture. Yo, E, I need you to call timeout. Need Brady to set the floor plan. Tropical blanket. Open for the shot. Yo, Greg, set the pick. Still 5 on the floor, still ride for my dog. Still battle on the court, still survive in the war. Keep your eye on the ball, or get burned from the keep this mic off the wall without turning the cheek. From night to day, no sleepy paths or allowed to mornings. The nut is sleeping us, never catch us snoring. Live from Miami, report in the heat with 5 Reasons Sports from the courts to the streets. Yeah, Wake County, Heat Nation, we say it proudly.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hoff, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. We are now recording this a week from Media Day. It's almost here. We've made it through the entire offseason. Unfortunately, Tyler Herro's ankle did not, so he will not be available to the Heat for the first month of the season. We've been talking a lot about that. We're going to get back to it today. We're going to do it in the context of the other guy on this team that is supposed to lead it. And we're going to talk about what he needs to do now, because I don't think we've done that enough, honestly, lately. We tend to do, Alex, a lot of Bam Adebayo episodes, but I just don't think we focused on him as much since the Herro injury as maybe we should have, and that was pointed out to me by a few folks here. And I just want to go through some stats here, because actually when Eternal was on the podcast with me, he mentioned this, and I think it's relevant now looking at the situation as it is. I think we characterize Bam's season a certain way because of the way it started. And if you look at the numbers, they are pretty much opposite of what they've been in recent years, because he has tended to start fast and finish kind of meekly, actually, towards the end of the season. And it was actually the complete polar opposite last year. If you look at his first...
Jimmy, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm going to go through it, and then we'll go through kind of how this will play into Tyler's absence. But if you go through his splits, okay, and I'm going to... October was only 4 games, all right? But he averaged 11 points, shot 39% from the floor in those 4 games. He got off to a really, really slow start. And then November, it kind of continued. He played 13 games in November. He did shoot he shot 43% from the floor, which is down for him. Averaged 17 points and 10 rebounds and 5 assists. So those raw numbers were pretty good. His on-off numbers also were pretty good. December, he averaged a little bit less in scoring, 16.6 points, 10.7 rebounds, 4.5 assists. But his shooting percentage came up to 48. And then January, he dipped again. He shot 48% from the floor, but averaged 15 points, just under 10 rebounds, 4 assists. Also, shot attempts. We talk about that a lot with Bam. He wasn't really getting a ton of shot attempts up. And remember, if you go back now, December, January is where it all went to hell with the Butler situation. Okay, so that should be taken into account. There was more of a burden on Bam, not just on the court, but off the court. But then I just want to give you the numbers from February on, because I think this is what we need to see now. This is, I think, the standard that he should be held to as the team captain and without Herro in there. And these numbers were really good. You look at February, 11 games. He shot 55% from the floor. He averaged 21.2 points, 9.8 rebounds. In March, he shot 50% from the floor, averaged 20.1 points and 9 rebounds. And in 5 games in April, prior to the playoffs, this does not include the play-in because they don't include the play-in stats. He had excellent on-off numbers. He averaged 24 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and shot 49% from the floor and 57% from 3 on increased volume. So this is not the Bam we're used to. This was a totally different Bam. I was going to ask you, why do you think that was last season before we get into whether or not he can start the season the way he finished it last year?
Well, I mean, look, I think a lot of it when you start looking at like those trends, it reminded me of what we used to say about Jimmy, where it's kind of the inverse of what you were pointing out with that Bam trend throughout all these years before last season, where it's like Jimmy would kind of start the years a little bit slower, and then towards the second half of the year, he would really turn up. I remember that the most. Obviously, the first season he was here, the second half was really just the bubble, right? So I don't know if you really count that, but that Jim VP year, which is the second Jimmy year, he really turned up in the second half of that season, and that's where that Jim VP buzz stemmed from. And we continue to see that trend, and we kind of attribute it now to kind of his sort of load management, where he kind of picks things up throughout the season. And we talked about it for years here, but I think that absolutely affected what would have happened with Bam. And it happened, I remember it very vividly with the last second half of the season that Jimmy was actually here, where Bam's numbers really dropped off. And, it just feels like the two were, directly correlated. Well, now, Jimmy's not here, so it kind of hits a reset on things. And, I think, part of the reason we're doing this show is we have high expectations for Bam. Now, I think those expectations might vary, right? Like depending on who you ask, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see now, not just without Jimmy, but now without Tyler. And then with this new acquisition, Norman Powell, whatever they try to do with Wiggins, whatever they try to do with Jovic, like what is that version of Bam going to look like? Because I just think now it's like we don't have precedent for this, because Bam has been a starter, with he started starting at the same time that they got Jimmy. So we don't really know what that version of Bam looks like other than the 2 months of sample size that we got post Jimmy trade. So I think you hope for the best, but it's like, well, is his job actually going to be like, is it actually going to be easier for him to produce more without these guys, or is it actually going to get harder?
I think some of it has to do with who he'll be playing with, right? And we've talked a lot about this in terms of lineups. So you don't have Herro. You're going to have Powell. You're likely going to have Davion Mitchell as a starter for probably the first month. You're going to have bringing Larson off the bench. And the question is going to be, is he starting next to Ware, or is he starting next to Jovic? And we've talked about how the responsibilities may be a little bit different for him. If Jovic is not starting, especially without Herro, Spoelstra is going to use Bam as a hub. He's going to use him at the high post a lot. He's going to use him to make plays for others. And my concern with that, although the ball will touch his hands a lot, is that he tends to be less aggressive in those situations, that he doesn't turn and go. The frustrations over the past few years about him not facing the basket and never looking at the basket. And sometimes the defender clears out and Bam could literally turn and go and doesn't. That worries me a little bit if he's going to be used, again, the ball be in his hands more, but if he's going to be used that way, it has to be drilled into him that, look, sometimes it's you, okay? And sometimes there isn't a play to be made for someone else, and you're just going to have to go get it. I think he should be held to these expectations now. I'm at that point. When you look at the defensive responsibilities he has, there's no question, okay? They're as much as or more than as anybody in the league. We never looked past that. We don't now. But this is going to be a defensive starting group for the most part. I mean, if Davion is going to start, if Wiggins is going to start, there's a little bit more help for him defensively than there was. There's no argument that can be made that taking Tyler out is going to make you worse defensively. It's not, okay, for all of Tyler's strengths on the other end. So you don't have to cover up for Tyler anymore. You're going to get a guy who we've done some stories recently even on the Sports Illustrated site about how, there's praise for Davion Mitchell from all these different places, including who has cited him as, as one of the best, lockdown defenders in the league. Tony Allen was a 6-time all defensive guy. Kevin Durant said, you can't start guys who are under 6'2" anymore unless they play defense like Davion Mitchell. So these are elite guys, either offensive or defensively, who have said, look, this guy is really, really good. That guy's going to be in the starting lineup instead of Tyler. To me, that frees things up, whether Ware starts or Jovic starts, for Bam to do a little bit more on the offensive end. And I don't see why he can't be a 23-9 guy. It's in him. Like, if you didn't see a sample size from February on, you'd say no, but it exists. So why can't we expect that consistently?
I think because of his limitations. And I think that's where me and some others have butted heads, like specifically YouTube commenters in the past, because I think it's almost like, yeah, we agree on his limitations. We just disagree on, what to do with it, I guess. Right. Because the Bam stuff, it's like, yeah, in general, like more shot attempts, right? If that's going to be the thing that happens now, more shot attempts lead to more points in general. But when you take away a shooter like Tyler from an offense that was already missing a lot of shooting, right? You're going to replace that with Powell, of course, which is, really nice that they got a player like him right about now. Just because he can step into some of that for sure. But man, when I think about Bam and what he can do with the ball in his hands, right? Let's even without like what you're talking about with, the defensive help that he's going to have in the starting lineup, just offensively, what he can do with the ball in his hands. I think it is good for a big, but I think it's limited. Like, I think he is not somebody who you give him the ball at the top of the key and he can just make a play, right? Like, he is not that type of player. I think where we can ask for more and have asked for more is sort of in his spots, right? When they set him with they set cross screens for him to get to his spot in the mid post. Sometimes, instead of always looking for that midi, which is a nice counter, and opponents know that you have that because he's been shooting it for years now, right? Try to take the big off to the basket, and we see flashes of it, right? Like specifically these slower bigs. But then the problem is once you take that first couple dribbles, once you get past like, oh yeah, he might have a faster first step than like a Nikola Vucevic who we can get by. Yeah, that part I agree with. The problem is once the help defense comes, once there's more people trying to get to the ball, right? And I think that he doesn't have the elite ball handle necessary to, because he definitely has the vision, right, to like make passes out of it. We've seen that. There's no doubt about it. Like he's somebody who's always looking to make the right play. But the scoring, like to be able to be an efficient scorer off the dribble, like you got to be able to like play through help defense. And I think like we talked about it years ago in the playoffs, sometimes he'll bring the ball down low before he's even moving, right? Like, so that's what happens when you do start moving. And that's where I think it gets like, yeah, he's going to make the pass, because a lot of times he's also seeing help defense because the Heat have one or two guys out there who the defense just doesn't respect. And they're like, yeah, we'd rather just go help over here and I think he falls victim to that. And I think when you take away Tyler, not only I think you're going to lose easier opportunities for Bam there because of their pick and roll stuff, which even though a lot of times you want it to be like more rim attempts, more lobs and stuff, even then he gets like some easy, those pocket pass out of the pick and roll Tyler to Bam mid-range shots that we've seen for years. Like, you don't want too much of it, but those are some easy ones for him, because a lot of times he's not getting those easy ones under the rim. So you're taking away those, right? You're taking away another guy who can find him easy opportunities, and you're giving him the ball in his hands to make plays. And I just think, I don't know if he's capable of like being the most effective version of himself in this situation that they're currently in right now. So it's like, yeah, I believe in Bam to be able to do more, but I don't know if the situation they have going on right now, is necessarily the one that's going to lead to an offensive Bam that we've been asking for. I don't think this is it. I do think we're going to see increased production. I just don't think it'll be a big jump. I think it'll be around what he was doing in the second half of last season.
All right. Well, actually, that's where we're going to get to on the other side. I want to get to some projections here and what we can be. So you tease that well. Before we do, though, I want to mention one of our great sponsors hosted us down in Doral a couple of weeks ago. We'll be back there again. Our friends at 305-800-PAIN, your first call after an accident. Get immediate attention, fast connection with trusted doctors and attorneys, always ready to take your call 24/7. They can handle it for you. The trust and credibility of an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, and also again, and as I said, they'll get to you right away because it's 24/7. The number itself is the brand. It's 305-800-PAIN. Also, this is Hispanic Heritage Month coming up. They're proud to serve their Hispanic community in South Florida. 305-800-PAIN is here for you in your language and in your city. So they serve Broward County as well as Dade. Reach out to them if you have a car accident. 305-800-PAIN. and we'll be back at their studios there soon. All right, so let's make some projections here. And well, first thing, I'm going to project, because if this doesn't happen, they're sunk. He's going to be better than he was the first 2 months of last season. I can't see him coming in as lethargic as he was. And I don't really know what caused that. The Jimmy situation probably played into it. Also, he had a very long summer. He played a lot of basketball. He was with the U.S. team. He did not have that this summer. It's been a little bit more relaxing for him. I mean, he has shown up some on social media, but it hasn't been this kind of stuff that's taxing. I mean, he brought the WNBA trophy to Las Vegas. Okay, there hasn't been a whole lot of WNBA MVP trophy. There hasn't been a lot that's really taxed him this summer compared to the previous summer. I think that refreshing him will be good here. Also, he's now in his third year as captain. I feel like Norm Powell is going to help him with some of those duties. When I talk to people behind the scenes, they expect Norm to take a leadership role really quickly. I think that will be good for Bam also. And I also think the thing that helps is that the Herro situation, I've said this on other podcasts, didn't come out of the blue. Like, this is 2 weeks before camp. It's not like a thunderbolt that happens on the third day of camp. So he'll know what adjustment needs to be made, and Spoelstra's going to talk to him about all those adjustments. So I don't know that we're going to get what we saw the last 2 months of the season, but I do think he can be in that 22-point range on decent efficiency. And I think as long as they don't lean on him, to space all the time, I still want the 3-point shot to come in the course of the normal offense. I'd like to see him take more corner threes. I think that's an easier shot for him. His efficiency from the 3-point line, for the 3-point arc, was good over the last 3 months of the season. But he went through about a month where it was terrible. I don't want that to be the featured part of his game. I really think it's more about attacks, versatility in terms of from the mid-range on in. And I'm not expecting a whole bunch of post-ups that are going to be effective. That's never really been his game. But I just want to see him use the quickness. And I get what you're saying about the help defense coming over. But I do think that when Bam is aggressive, he gets there. It's just it's that little hesitation, and then the help defense comes, and then he sort of gets lost, and then the ball's down low, and then there are turnovers, and then there are mistakes, and then there's frustration. He's just got to go, in my view. And I understand that what he may run into there, but my hope for him is 22 points per game over the first couple months of the season when Tyler's out, and try to do it at 50%. I think if he could do that, then with Norm's production, and I think Wiggins' increased production, and Larson and some of the others, Jovic, they might be okay for a little while.
I think what you're describing there would be absolutely a win. No doubt about it. If you're getting efficient Bam with the increased production, and I'm not trying to say like he's this inefficient player. That's not what I'm getting at. I just mean like if you're keeping that efficiency that he's known for, right? Where his effectiveness is not coming down from you asking more of him and maybe to create and score tougher shots at times, because we know that his tendency is to take the contested midi, right? I think like this is all the stuff we're talking about here is related. Like it's the midi a lot of times for him, it's probably like what he thinks of and what he looks at as the counter to the first step, which is probably what they're guarding for first and foremost, right? Like I think if you're a defender, if you're a big who is like a bigger player that is maybe slower than Bam, right? You're playing the drive. You're right. You'd rather him take a contested midi over your outstretched arms, even with a little bit of space, rather than he drive past you and you either create a scramble for your defense or he just scores, right? And I think sometimes it's almost like he relies on the counter too much. And I think that's the stuff that I've had frustrations with. Is like I wish he would, establish that driving threat a little bit more. Even though, like I've been trying to say, it is easier said than done, because the Heat for just so long now, like have just had these suboptimal spacing situations. And then like Bam is this guy who, he sees that there's a guy waiting for him on this side or a guy waiting for him on this side. He's going to swing it to the open player. And I think that's where the frustrations come. It's like, yeah, I'm glad that you're willing to make that pass, but you got to mix up the ways that you're attacking it, right? Where it's like, you can't always make the same decision, or else I think that's where things become predictable. And so we're asking, and I think what you mentioned about him being refreshed this summer, as opposed to others, I think makes sense, right? And hopefully that helps as well. But what makes me skeptical is that they're going to revert to some of the, stuff that necessarily hasn't been always efficient in the past, where it's like they're gonna go back to Wiggins one-on-one. And it's like I like that, like I've always said, he since they acquired him, he's a little bit more capable of some of that stuff than maybe I would have expected. But I think it's another thing where it's like how much are they going to rely on that, right? Like, is that going to be something where they're asking him to score a lot more than they are Bam? Then I think things can get ugly for Bam if that's the case. Like, I think Wiggins and Bam are not necessarily two players who like play off of each other a whole lot. You don't want Wiggins running pick and roll, right? And I think unlike Jimmy, when Jimmy had the ball in his hands and it didn't necessarily lead to Bam easy baskets, at least it was creating good baskets for Jimmy, for his teammates, potentially free throw attempts. The Wiggins stuff is really just for himself, right? I'm not trying to call him a selfish player. He's just not an advanced passer. Like, he might see a pass, but maybe he sees it a second too late. Like, he's a scorer first once he has the ball in his hands. So the Wiggins stuff makes me a little bit skeptical. And then you have Powell, another unprecedented situation. We've never seen him, be in this type of role that I think they're going to ask him, where he's going to be the guy taking the most shot attempts, I think. And maybe I'm wrong about that, but I just think he looked at his best when he was kind of playing within the offense. And then like his game really popped, right? Because he wasn't just, pounding the ball. Like, they might ask a lot of Powell this year, and I just don't really know what to expect. Like, I don't know and maybe it's like a role where maybe he's not pounding the ball that much, but then how do you get there? Like, I wonder what the offense is going to look like. And that's why I have skepticism about where Bam is going to be at, because like how are you getting to what is the Powell usage? What is the Wiggins usage? Davion is going to touch the ball a lot. What if they start Nico? Like, I don't know what to expect with their offense right now. And it's getting in the way of what to expect from Bam, because all of this is very new here. I would probably expect somewhere around 20 points per game, 8-9 rebounds, and decent efficiency.
Well, I think you hit on something. The two players he's been most comfortable with on the court have been Tyler Herro and Duncan Robinson, and not in that order. And he's not going to have either of them at the start of the year. I'm not including Jimmy in that because Jimmy didn't pass to him. I mean, we talked about it a lot. Like, he just did not involve him. I know what you said, that it got looks for Jimmy, but it didn't really get looks for Bam consistently. But the Duncan and Tyler absences, the absence of the dribble handoff with Duncan, the absence of the pick and rolls with Tyler, which I know there's been fluctuation in the effectiveness of that, but it was
going to be a lot of handoffs to Powell, that's for sure.
Well, they're going to have to. That chemistry is probably the most important chemistry to start, because I agree with you that Bam and Wiggins are not an ideal fit, because the way that they would fit would require Wiggins to do more than I think you want him to actually do. The question is, can Powell handle it? That's where I think this is an interesting experiment for Spo, because he's taking a guy that he hasn't had before, who was already going to have a big role with his team, and now he's going to have to take some of Tyler's responsibilities. And I do think the one thing that is going to come out of this is people are going to respect a little bit more how much Tyler was actually handling in the last two months of last year. Like, and I don't mean handling, ball handling, although he was doing some of that. I mean handling in the offense. Like, it was all falling on him. But Bam found his numbers in the context of that. And now Bam's going to have to find them with somebody else. So I'm putting the burden on him, not because of the max contract, but because they've given him ownership of this team in a whole bunch of ways. And I think it's on him to kind of figure it out. The numbers are in there, but the circumstances are not ideal. So I think we get the circumstances part.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The last, like, it really is just what I'm going to be watching in regards to this Bam thing is how open Davion and Kalaware are left. If those are the other two starters in that starting lineup that we're seeing.
That's why Alex, I think Nikola Jovic is going to be starting at some point.
But then even then, you've got Larson coming off the bench. You've got potentially Jaquez coming off the bench. Those are the guys that I'd be like, they're going to be left open. And I think Bam is just a guy who is, the tendency is to make the right play. Because I think he also knows his limitations a little bit, but I also wish he did it sometimes.
Right.
You can't get by guys. It's just, what do you do after that? And are you positioned as a team to be able to optimize him because of his limits? That's where I get back to it.
Do you know who I think he's going to play well? And I got to close this, but I think who he's going to play well with and is going to get minutes? Fontecchio.
Okay.
I'd watch that. I think because Fontecchio can't do everything Duncan did from what we've seen, but he can do some things. And I think having a guy who's got some height and can shoot when he's on will help Bam. And I think that's a two-man combination to watch. I wouldn't be surprised if you see the two of them play together in some small lineups. Just throwing that out there. All right, Alex, appreciate it. Thanks to our sponsors, 305-800-PAIN. Also, PrizePicks, use the code FIVE. Have a good one, everybody.